In today's video, I'm ranking 99 modular sets, every modular set in the game. This even includes the standard and expert sets, because why not? And it's been a lot. It's been weeks in the making, technically years, because when I play Marvel Champions, I've always changed up the modulars. It brings new life to the scenarios, but also new life to the modulars. You get lots of different experiences, from the famously easy modulars to the infamously difficult ones. We're covering everything here, and I'm really excited. But rather than just the experience, I've gone through every single modular set and also every scenario, every encounter set, just to be, completely complete. And I've been estimating the difficulty, ranking every card. It's been a lot. But I wanted to make sure I didn't have any personal bias in it. So I've been assigning different values to things, calculating, recalculating, refining it, recalculating, and combining all of that with my own experience as well. We have come to this list today. So let's get into it. While this video will mostly deal with the difficulty of modular sets, I will touch on theme and I will touch on the mechanics which, give them their difficulty. How do they interact with the game? And there's a lot to go through. And just talking about difficulty, even just playing a different hero, using a different deck, playing against a different villain, one modular set can be more difficult or less difficult depending on so many different factors. And even multiplayer, solo, that changes its standard, and expert can even change it, especially for a couple of modular sets. There's a lot that goes into this. So I want you guys to think of these ratings that we're about to get to as, not a definitive, this suits every situation kind of rating, but it's a kind of a number, a ranking, a, tier kind of placement, if you will. It's meant to serve as a starting point, a foundation. If you've never changed the modular sets before, then this is meant to serve as a really solid starting point for you. I know you guys want to get to the ranking, but give me 30 seconds and everything will make a lot more sense. I'm ranking them within 10 different difficulty levels, starting at ultra easy up to, medium, difficult, ending at omega level threat. So that's going to be really, really fun. Now, interesting to note, most scenarios use modular sets from between, difficulty 7 and 3, easy to very difficult, which makes sense. These are also the biggest categories with the most modular sets in them, because that's just where, most of them fall. It's also worth noting that once we get a few levels in, most of the mod sets in the game are minions. There are a lot of minion modular sets. So let's get into a little bit of soft ranking here. Standard 1 and Standard 3, about the same difficulty overall, fall roughly around difficulty level 5, a good challenge. So actually these standard sets offering quite a lot of difficulty. In some scenarios, they're the most difficult cards in the set, I think it's fair to say. Talking about the easier ones in general here. But then we have Expert 1, which I think roughly falls around level 7, very difficult, mainly because of Under Fire. Then we've got Standard 2 and Expert 2, which if you watch my recent video on them, they kind of are extremely difficult. So this is kind of a foundation for these sort of standard and expert sets you might be putting into your scenarios, and hopefully it gives you guys a rough idea of what to expect here. The very last thing before we finally get into it is I've told you guys a tiny little lie, a little white lie, and that is that there are actually 12 difficulty levels that we're using in this video. 1 to 10, these are the main ones that we're focusing on, but technically I'm also including 0, which is bonus sets, and -1, which are sets that actually help the play. They're actually not adding difficulty on at all, they're helping. So we're going to start there, and I really hope you guys enjoy this. Up first, we have Ship Command from Galaxy's Most Wanted, and long story short, you get the Milano, it generates a resource for you every turn. That's really helpful. To make things even better, a bunch of encounter cards in the encounter deck can be cancelled by the Milano. Now, in multiplayer, you can't cancel all of them sometimes, and, Rogue Vessel is always a little bit annoying, but overall, this is hugely in the player's favor. If you want to make your scenario easier, this is a great way to do it. Just call on the Guardian's ship. Next up is Hope Summers, and this is an ally with infinite uses, no consequential damage, that copies your stats. It's very useful. You start with it turn 1, just like the Milano, and it's really good. If you use leadership cards, or just cards that boost allies in general, you can absolutely break the game with this ally. It makes things much easier. The only thing to watch out for is there is a side scheme that goes into the encounter deck that can exhaust her, and she, if she leaves play, if you try to block an attack with her or an encounter card targets her, which is a little bit more likely perhaps, you can lose the game from that, so watch out. But generally, having this infinite use free ally all the time, really good. Use this to make scenarios easier. Lastly in this category, we have Long Shot. And sometimes it's a bit of a long shot if you'll even see him in a game. Sometimes he's a boost card or just gets discarded. Doesn't do much there, though he doesn't have boost icons. But if he is revealed from the encounter deck, you get him as an ally, and he's pretty useful in that regard. So you can throw him in for a little bonus to make things a little bit easier, but you can't rely on him, and you might not see him actually on the board at all. That basically concludes our first category. I would say Ship Command makes the game the easiest, but if you use leadership cards and different things to boost Hope Summers up, then I would say that maybe, exceeds it. You can do some really crazy things with that if you lean into it. Whereas Long Shot, you can throw him in there and maybe he'll help you out. Our first bonus set is the Power Stone, and this is probably a good time to mention that the encounter card count you'll see on the screen, it's only for cards which actually go into the encounter deck, and the Power Stone never goes into the encounter deck. It just gets attached to the villain, and if you hit the villain hard enough, it gets attached to you. It gives you or the villain a boost to your stats, and it's interesting, if the villain has it, it's bad for you. If you have it, it's good for you. Typically, players have more ability to control where it is, normally, keeping it on you, and, can ready up more potentially and get a lot of uses out of it. But it does depend. Sometimes the villain will take it unexpectedly, or, you haven't got it from the start of the game, and then you get extra attacks coming your way. It can hurt a lot. So not strictly in the player's favor, but more often than not, I would say this is in the player's favor. Next up is Streets of Mayhem, and I really, really like this set, but it's kind of ambiguous whether this helps the player or hurts them. One of them, Back Alley Enclave, you can see it on the screen here. Each character and player gets +1 attack. Yeah, you and all your allies and everything, they're doing a lot more damage to the villain, but the villain and the minions are hitting you for more too. There's also one that gives steady, which is great if you've got a status card on you, but if you've stunned or confused the villain, it's going to feel terrible. So suddenly, that's going to lose effectiveness on the villain, so on and so forth. But they're really fun, and I really like them. They can change up the game at random times, and you don't expect it, and it's fun to play around that. That's it for bonus sets. Not many in these early categories. The next couple of categories are quite small as well, and then we get on to some pretty huge categories. So this is probably a good time to mention the theme column. So Streets of Mayhem, I've said it has a city theme. Any villain or scenario that you can imagine taking place fighting you in a city, in an urban environment, makes sense for Streets of Mayhem because, it's all city locations, and you can just be a purely mechanical player. Sometimes I'm like this, but if you want to match the theme up, that's what that column is there for, to help you guys out. I won't touch on it for every set, but it'll always be on the screen in some capacity when we get to the end of a few cards. The first of the proper modular sets is going to be Goblin Gimmicks. This one is super easy. All the encounter cards, whenever they come up, I'm like, basically a free pass. Maybe it'll deal 2 indirect damage, or I could pay to remove it if for some reason I really didn't want that, but, you're just going to let those pumpkin bombs hit you. Same for Goblin Glider, +1 attack to the villain. You can probably tank that for a round if you need to. It's just going to cost you 2 resources to get rid of it. It's fine. Everything here is very easy. Some of the boost effects are a little bit scary, but on the whole, no problems here with Goblin Gimmicks. Up next, we have Experimental Weapons, which are, again, super easy, basically full of attachments as well. They go onto the villain, and you just pay a couple resources, and they're gone. The one on the screen is probably the meanest of them, but most of them you can just leave on the villain for a couple turns, deal with them when you want to, and you're going to be just okay. Then we have Bomb Scare, pretty much the first modular set everyone here has used, myself included, against Rhino. It's very, very simple, and it can hurt you a tiny bit, but earning a tiny bit, really, this set is very, very easy to fight. In terms of theme, I think Goblin Gimmicks and Experimental Weapons, anyone who uses tech, anyone who's prone to use weaponry of any kind, you can make it make sense. Maybe Norman Osborn has lent out some of his Goblin gear to somebody else, or they've stolen it, or they've kind of copied it, anything like that. Same for Experimental Weapons, anyone can have that kind of tech. Bomb Scare is a little bit more specific to Hydra, but you can be fighting one villain, and, Hydra could be up to some shenanigans in the background. Maybe they're trying to set off this bomb, and like, oh no, you need to stop them. But oh no, Sabretooth, for some reason, he's trying to hit the sensor, and you've got you can hit things on multiple points. It doesn't necessarily mean you have to match up the modular set thematically, if you care about theme, to the scenario. You just have to make a story that makes sense why both of these kind of different entities could be in the same place. And I think that is a pretty fun way to do it. The first of our very easy sets is going to be Military Grade. Now, some of these cards are just as easy or easier than the cards we looked at in Ultra Easy. The Inhibitor Collar is barely an encounter card in my opinion. You can just exhaust, yourself or an ally, and it's gone. No questions asked. And if for some reason you can't do that, it gives you a different way to do it, which is pretty incredible. However, there are a couple of cards in here, such as the Senator's Support, which make it a little bit more difficult. Then we have Zax, and this is almost ultra easy as well. But if you have a lot of energy resources, it can be dangerous. Zax's, boost effect here is a little bit annoying. So there's a couple of things which can make it harder, but 99 times out of 100, maybe a small exaggeration, but generally this set is going to be very, very easy. The encounter cards are barely going to bother you. Down to Earth in multiplayer is up next, and some of the sets in this I've marked as multiplayer and solo, basically meaning at different player counts, they have different difficulties. So Down to Earth in multiplayer, which I'm really talking about 3 to 4 player here, is a lot easier, even in 2-player in fact, because you can go alter ego to deal with the cards. Everything in Down to Earth really wants you to go alter ego. Solo, that's very dangerous. Multiplayer, absolutely no problem to do so, and then it's actually very beneficial and very easy to deal with these cards. Basically the same story for Dystopian Nightmare. Hunted puts down this hazard icon. That is a scary card if you just look at that bit, but the alter ego action is just discard a card to get rid of it. One card to solve an encounter card is incredibly generous and easy. However, it sends you Alter Ego, which in solo can be a bit of a trap because Dystopian Nightmare has some other things, crisis icons, which can, if you've got Alter Ego and the threat has gone up, you can be in a little bit of trouble. Very similar story again for Sitcom. Again, it's trying to send you to Alter Ego, so I can't say this is very easy in solo play in kind of a general sense, but in multiplayer, you can easily flip down and solve most of these things. They're all low pressure, no problems at all. That concludes the very easy category. Again, things are about to get much bigger, many more encounter sets in the next categories, but this covers it for now. And I think the kind of themes here are pretty interesting. I called Dystopian Nightmare kind of the feud theme because it has like targeted for extermination. It has things like hunted. It's really like someone is out to get you. Someone has a real problem with you. So I think you can apply this, even though it's dystopian, and of course it fits anywhere dystopian, but you can apply this to any villain which might have a problem with your hero, and I think that's kind of fun. Same kind of thing with Sitcom. I put the drama theme on here because you've got things like Family Matters or The Odd Couple. If you've got Vision and Scarlet Witch against Magneto, for example, you can have different kind of context to these cards that come up, and I just think that's really, really fun. This is also probably a good time to focus on the card count. So again, the card count is the encounter cards that go into the encounter deck. The bigger the modular set, the more likely you are to draw one of those cards from the modular set once it's been shuffled in there, the more influential it is. So military grade at 5, you're going to see a little bit less than Down to Earth or the Zax sets, which have 7 cards in. And some modular sets get way more extreme. Some have 4 in, such as experimental weapons we looked at, and there's 1 or 2 more. And some have 10, like Band of Badoon, which we'll get to. The first of our easy modulars is a bit of a weird one. This is the Age of Apocalypse modular, and it's mostly just for the campaign in the Age of Apocalypse box. However, it is not campaign restricted. There are effects on them which work without having the special side missions from the campaign there, so they count, and basically they're just small minions with Quick Strike. Next up is Armies of Titan, and these cards are pretty okay. They're not putting a lot of pressure on you. The boost effect's a bit annoying, discarding cards a little bit annoying, but they're pretty easygoing overall. Fantasy is one of the hardest sets to rate for this. I almost put them a category down, I almost put them a category up. If you can't deal with them, they're a problem. This dragon has 3 attack, retaliate, toughness, 10 health per person. That's crazy. But if you can defeat it, you get to draw 4 cards, and it does take double damage from cards with energy resources, which makes it a lot easier to deal with. The rest of the cards in the fantasy set are basically less extreme versions of this. Kind of got some kind of little catch, a little bit difficult to deal with, but when you deal with it, you get rewarded, which makes up for a lot of the difficulty and actually kind of rewards you, especially with the kind of the show setting environment kind of thing that basically gives you a bigger hand size that's quite favorable for the player. So generally, I think this is an easier set, but it can be a little bit more difficult at the wrong time. Up next is Legions of Hell, and this is a really, really easy set. It's these side schemes in here which are the most annoying. There's a couple of them, and because these minions are so easy to deal with, they tend to surge because they look for undead minions, and if there aren't any, it's going to surge. But yeah, everything's pretty simple and straightforward to deal with here. Mutant Slayers has slightly bigger minions than we've been dealing with so far, but they are very predictable. They're very flat. There are 10 cards in this set, and all 10 of them are basically, the same. Some have 4 health, some have 6 health, some do different things when they activate. But you can expect a lot of these guys to come up when you put the modular set into a scenario, and, just a little bit of damage on them, and it's completely solved. It's pretty rare that they actually get to activate, and you even see their forced interrupt. And when you do, you have multiple choice, which makes it easier to deal with. So we have not finished the easy set yet. This is just a little recap of what we looked at so far. Different themes, fantasy works with any kind of magical enemy, I think. Legions of Hell as well. Maybe they're using sort of a, necromantic magic. We can put it in anything undead or Halloween related. There's a few things it works with. I think that's pretty fun. And yeah, let's move on. Ransacked Armory is a really weird set to categorize because it's full of attachments that go on minions, but there are 2 minions in it as well. And a couple of the attachments make you search for minions. So if you put this into an encounter set, you're going to see more minions in general, as well as attach the attachments to existing minions in that scenario. And it's pretty fun. I quite like it, but putting a attachment onto a minion, generally not that big of a deal, not that bad. Usually means you've got to hit it once extra at worst, or use a slightly bigger attack. Easy going, not too big of a deal, no immediate pressure here. Temporal is a really fun modular set. It comes with the Kang scenario pack. It's got everything from ancient warriors to dinosaurs to, aliens, and I enjoy it a lot. The boost effect's a little bit annoying, the quick strike's a bit annoying, the tough on the dinosaurs, a little bit annoying, but really not too bad, pretty mild overall. Next up, we have the Sentinels, and I'm going to talk about this in the same kind of breath as the Zero Tolerance Modular, because both of them are full of Sentinels that kind of interact in interesting ways with attachments and things, but none of them are too dangerous or too pressing. The Zero Tolerance set does have that side scheme, which introduces a new loss condition if, too many allies block attacks, but it's pretty easy to get rid of. There's no immediate pressure here either. I think one or two of them might have quick strikes, something like that, and there's a few toughs around, but nothing really too bothersome to deal with. As you guys might have noticed, a lot of the modular sets now, and this will continue for the next few difficulty levels as well, are minions. There are so many minion sets in the game. And something I want to point out about Sentinels and Zero Tolerance as well, although they fit basically, any mutant-themed scenario or against any mutant heroes, they could turn up and try and attack them, whatever they're up to. It also kind of works well for Ultron because, they're basically, robots, and, he builds robots, drones, different things. I think that's kind of fun. Ransacked Armory, I think, is pretty flexible. You can put it into most places. And Temporal, it's kind of weird why most, villains might have these, enemies from different times joining them, but you can make that work. I think it's very fun. You can even throw that into Dark Beast, which is another time travel scenario, as well as Kang, so that's pretty awesome. Next up, we have Power Drain, which isn't too bad overall, but Electro himself can be a little bit of a problem, and it's kind of interesting how this one works. Really, if you want to get through the encounter deck quick, set up some acceleration tokens, this is the set that's going to do it for you. Now we have Down to Earth in solo mode, and yes, it's still a little bit difficult sometimes to go Alter Ego in some scenarios, especially with certain heroes, certain aspects, but if you can go Alter Ego, everything is pretty easy to deal with here. Particularly this Common Criminal, there are multiple copies of this. You spend the physical, basically take it out, and once it's defeated by that, you get to draw a card or remove free threat, so it basically solves itself in quite a beneficial way. Very similar for Sitcom, it's still kind of a pain to get to Alter Ego in solo mode, but when you do, it's pretty easy to get rid of the obligations, and the setting kind of environment that can be in play if you find it. It's actually quite beneficial to remove obligations. You get card draw, which is really good. And that really concludes our look at easy Power Drain. It's the only real new one here that we've not seen so far. And overall, our list looks like this. Hopefully you guys can see this on mobile view, because there's a lot of sets coming into play here, and it's only going to get crazier as we move on. Before we go any further, I just want to shout out Into the AM, which is a clothing brand that's actually kind of, partnered with this channel, and everyone wears clothes, hopefully you do at least, and I really, really like their clothes. This here, they didn't send it to me or anything, it is just something I got myself, and it's really comfortable. They do all sorts of clothes, from plain t-shirts like this, to awesome graphic tees, to vintage things, to button-up shirts, and there's a sale on right now for Labor Day, there's clearance, they have other stuff coming up, there's always something awesome going on with new designs coming in almost every week. Please check it out if you haven't already. I have an affiliate link in the description, which means I get a little bit back if you do buy something, but you also get 10% off. And yeah, you get something with a discount. I get a little bit of something. It really helps support the channel. I put so much time into these videos. Thanks so much. Let's get back to the Marvel Champions modular set difficulty ranking. That's a long thing, isn't it? At difficulty level 4, we have the Black Order, probably one of the more difficult ones at difficulty level 4 at medium, but nonetheless, apart from Supergiant, which is kind of a big problem, everything else is pretty steady, pretty easy to be dealt with. Then we have the Shadow King, and this one is a little bit annoying as well if you get the Shadow King come in, and the Possession card does basically steal your allies, so you kind of lose an attack block while, have to deal with a minion, but Possession actually doesn't do anything harmful towards you otherwise, it just takes away some of your toys. A little bit annoying, but not too much pressure from this one. Mutant Insurrection is a really interesting set. This guy here on the screen has 4 boost icons, and the rest of the set has about 2 boost icons, very high average boost icons, so the villain is going to hit hard or scheme hard while this is around, but other than that, it's very unlikely that the minions here are going to get to do anything before you defeat them, and quite a lot of them have low scheme, which means if you do have a problem, you can run away Alter Ego, and they're not going to do much. As you can see for Forearm here, the force response only happens when he attacks, so if he schemes for 0, you are completely fine, which is pretty forgiving. Next up, we have the Dark Riders in solo. In solo, you are somewhat unlikely to have the forced response trigger, which means that they are pretty blank minions for the most part, not too difficult at all. But there are a couple of annoying boost effects. The side scheme is slightly annoying, so I just think they creep into medium sort of difficulty for solo play. And obviously, because of the teamwork trait, they are harder in multiplayer, as we will see. Not every minion set that has a teamwork keyword, has sort of a version of it on this video, sort of multiplayer on a high difficulty ranking. Sometimes they just go from sort of the lower side of one difficulty level to the upper side, but don't really move. But these guys, because they have effects that when they attack you, bad things happen, the multiplayer experience with them is a lot worse. Hydra Assault is a classic from the first expansion, Rise of Red Skull, and I really like these guys, but if you don't defend them the right way, the Flame Soldier will punish you. You could lose a support both from its attack, but more likely from its boost effect, which is really, really annoying. And the other minion has Quick Strike, and the boost effect there will make the villain attack you again, which is generally, annoying, but fine. But if the villain has a lot of attack stat, or maybe it's someone like Thanos or Magneto, where them activating again triggers something else, or 4 horsemen, it's particularly annoying and just gives the Hydra Assault a little bit of extra difficulty than some sets, but they're probably the easiest one on this medium category. And I will say they have quite a low boost icons in terms of damage, so they're not adding too much damage or threat on if you aren't able to mitigate it with defending, allies blocking, that kind of thing. So as you can see, we've got quite a lot of minion sets building up here with different themes from Space to Hydra, but there's another category of card we've not seen yet, which is very similar to minions. It's actually a type of minion, and I call that the mini boss. So let's look at Armadillo here, and this set can be a little bit annoying. There are lots and lots of toughs that will happen, but other than that, it's just a big enemy. If you can pop the tough and get rid of Armadillo, you only have to do it once or twice throughout the whole scenario, and otherwise his encounter cards aren't too bad in my opinion. It's a very similar story for a mess of things. Scorpion is a problem, and his set actually comes with a copy of Gang Up, which is a problem, but his other encounter cards, no big deal, and overall, it's not the worst thing that could happen compared to the other sets we're going to look at in the future. Same for another mini-boss here, we have Rhino from City in Chaos. There are a couple of encounter cards, Rhino and one other that, bring Rhino into play, but other than that, everything's fine. It can add acceleration tokens on if you're not prepared, but at least just adding on an acceleration token kind of gives you a free pass to do whatever you need to do in that moment, so not too bad. A little bit dangerous, it's in the medium category, it's not easy, but still completely fine in my opinion. Doesn't add too much trouble from my experience. Running Interference is a weird set. A couple of the cards cause, treacheries to trigger multiple times, but they're super, super easy to get rid of. It's just, discard a card and it's gone. So if you get it at the wrong time, it's a major problem, but that's fairly rare. Tombstone is quite annoying, but just finding 9 damage once, maybe twice per scenario, if you're unlucky, it's really not a big deal. Tombstone himself is quite annoying, but there's a chance you just don't find him. There's no other card in the set which will bring Tombstone into play, so if he's a boost card, you're fine. As you can see, we've got a bunch of mini-bosses stack up, and you're going to see a few more of those mini-boss sets scattered throughout this video. All of these ones, basically criminals, they fit the crime theme, and they're pretty interchangeable as well. You can swap out City and Chaos for Armadillo, get kind of a similar experience, but a little bit different. It's kind of fun. Next up, we have Weapon Master, and this set's kind of dangerous because it can make the villain activate, it can make them scheme or attack, and if they have a weapon, which it has several of, it will surge. But it's kind of unlikely, I think, because the weapons are quite easy to remove, and the weapons themselves don't add too much pressure. So the extra activations are very scary, but everything else very, very relaxed. And then we have Celestial Tech, which is very different because, the Weapons Master adds, pistols and knives and grenades. This is adding this giant kind of, crazy sword and armor, and I really like this one. I think it's really fun, but when it comes up, nothing happens. You kind of have a free pass to do whatever you want because it just gets attached to the villain and you can't get rid of it, so you might as well just continue with your game. So it's kind of low pressure, but to get rid of it, you have to, when the villain would activate, attacking for the weapon, scheming for the armor, you discard a card from the top of your deck. Depending on what symbol you get, you could immediately get rid of the weapon or armor, and, you just got one bad effect, fine. Sometimes it can last for several turns and it's really annoying, kind of an attrition kind of style thing. But overall, not too bad. Arcade is a really fun set to talk about. It just arrived with Jubilee. There are a bunch of side schemes which do bad things when you defeat them. They are, they have the trap trait because, oh, you try to get rid of it. Oh, this bad thing happened. Pretty fun, but they're not too difficult to deal with. They don't scale up too much. So about medium difficulty. Justice will probably breeze through them, whereas, aggression and protection decks, talking solo play might struggle a bit more, but pretty fun. Arcade is the worst card from that set because, you have to deal with Arcade. And when revealed, he brings in one of those side schemes. But I really enjoy the set. I think it's really good. Personal Nightmare is a really fun set. It's got a little mix of different things coming at you. And generally, I think you can throw this anywhere. And it just kind of works. And that brings us to the end of kind of the medium category a bit. I didn't know what to put for theme for Celestial Tech. I don't know who Celestial stuff really suits. I'm not hugely into that, in the comics or anything. But what I like with, this kind of epic seeming armor and weapon, I like to give it to the warriors. Give it to Thanos, give it to Magog. I think that's really cool. Weapons Master suits anyone that would use, a knife or a pistol. I think it suits, street level kind of enemies quite well, or military. In fact, I really enjoy all 4 of these sets. I think they're really good. So this is how things look overall. As you can see, a lot of minions, a lot of mini bosses in this one, and a huge variety of where these come from. Hopefully the abbreviations make sense. RORS is Rise of Red Skull, AOA is Age of Apocalypse, and so on. No prizes for deciphering what Jubilee means. It's from Jubilee's Hero Pack. So this is how the medium difficulty sets look. They are all, in some ways a little bit dangerous or a little bit annoying, but, they're not really difficult, but at the same time, they definitely don't fit the easy category. For difficulty level 5, we have a good challenge. These are sets that are going to be a little bit difficult. They have, some spicy things in there. They're going to ask a bit more of the player, but they're still pretty okay to deal with. Hydra Patrol is the first one of my favorites, and it has a few of these Hydra soldiers, which are actually very, very annoying because they have a guard, so you have to deal with them, and when you defeat them, you get another encounter card. That means in the next encounter phase, you have an extra encounter card for basically no reason, no fault of your own, but multiple encounter cards revealed together, a little bit more dangerous. Sometimes the effects interact. You're then going to be, have to deal with multiple things on the subsequent turn. So these are pretty scary. But the other minions in this set are ultra easy. I would basically, put them in one of the first two categories. So it kind of balances out slightly, but because you're getting extra encounter cards, putting these in a scenario which is, baseline quite difficult, is going to be really scary. Putting them in a scenario which is baseline very easy, not too bad, because that encounter card it's going to find you is probably going to be, fairly chill, and, you're easily able to deal with it. BC Boys are fun. They're from the hood. We'll have a couple of those modulars now. And the minions ask quite a bit from you, but the side scheme and treachery card, pretty easy going. Then we have Crossfire's crew. This will try and take out your allies a little bit, but other than that, nothing too crazy. Similar with Sinister Syndicate, they have, quite annoying boost effects, but they are otherwise, mostly okay. The side scheme does have quite annoying effect on it, so watch out for that in multiplayer, but nothing too crazy to deal with, but you're going to have to stay on your toes. Next up, we have Masters of Evil, which is really fun. It's from the core set, but surprisingly difficult, it's not in the difficult category, but it's in a good challenge category because they all have annoying boost effects. They have, 6, 7, health or so, they ask a little bit more from the player than some sets do, so they can be dangerous in that regard. What's really fun to talk about these kind of, together now that we can see them all, is that the Masters of Evil will have the Masters of Evil trait, and so do some of the cards in a Sinister Syndicate. Now, BC Boys has a Masters of Evil as well in them. So if you combine some of these sets, they kind of, react to each other's, encounter cards. In the same kind of way, one of the BC Boys has a Crossfire crew trait, and Sinister Syndicate and Crossfire's crew, there are minions in both of those that have the criminal trait and things like that. So these are all fun to mix and match if you want to use more than one set in a scenario. Really highly recommend trying some of these together. Hydra Patrol doesn't quite fit the rest of them here, but it's a really fun set. You can try throwing in other sort of scenarios, especially some of the easier ones if you want to make them a little bit more difficult. Next up, we have a couple of mutant minion modulars, which is kind of hard to say. Starting with Extreme Measures. This is very much like the Mutant Insurrection we looked at. They also have the Mutant Liberation Front. There's a side scheme which they can both interact with, so it's fun to use those together. They're normally together in Strife's, scenario. And these all kind of have an effect that happens when they're revealed, or, makes something slightly more difficult to deal with them. They have an effect. They're not just, a lot of minions tend to just be a bunch of hit points and you defeat them and they're gone. But these will have had some effect or, made you deal with them slightly differently, which just makes them a little bit more difficult, and I really enjoy them. Next up, we have the Nasty Boys, which is a very, very fun, and, Ruckus here stuns you. Most of the other ones just have a bunch of keywords like, Surge or Quick Strike, slapped on them. Bit of a weird mix of cards here. They have the teamwork thing as well, so they're harder in multiplayer. Now the Dark Riders make their return. In multiplayer, you're going to get the teamwork triggering more, which means their force responses are actually going to start to hit you, and that makes them a little bit difficult to deal with sometimes. Brotherhood is a mod set that I think most people underestimate. They think it's really easy. There's a couple of annoying boost effects, and the side scheme has quite a surprising amount of threat on it. It always comes in at the wrong time, gives some quick strike as well as a hazard icon, so it's hitting you on two fronts if you leave it. So actually, quite a respectable mod set in my opinion. What I think is fun here is that these are all mutant themed, but from different mutant expansions. So they kind of fall around the same place. So anything that asks for Brotherhood, you can give it Extreme Measures or Nasty Boys, and you'll probably get a relatively good experience around the right difficulty level. So that's really cool. Dystopian Nightmare makes its return as well here, but for solo mode, where I think it's way more difficult. And this will surprise people because I think most people will think Dystopian Nightmare is just a really easy set. But this thing is out to get you. This obligation you see on the screen, Hunted, it's got that hazard icon, so you really want to go Ultrico to deal with it, but that will make the main scheme go up. But then some of the other cards from this set are called Targeted for Extermination. 2 copies, it's a side scheme with a crisis icon. When you defeat it, you are confused. So if you want to try and bring that main scheme threat back down, you've got to get through the crisis, then you've got to get through the confused. It is a trap that can end solo games. Don't sleep on it. I am a little bit scared of this set in solo sometimes. You might go for a whole game and, it might not come as an encounter card at all, and, especially not in that combination, but it can. And if it does, it will hurt you. Under Attack is from the core set, and it kind of wants to take out your allies. The Concussive Blast card is the most annoying one. When revealed, 1 damage to each friendly character. In multiplayer, it can take out a whole bunch of allies at the table, but in solo play, a little bit annoying. Generally, though, if you're not relying on allies, it's not as bad. But if you do dare block with an ally with, 1 hit point left as usual, the boost effect from Concussive Blast can take it out. Kind of makes it like overkill, which is quite annoying. But not too difficult, but you have to respect it, and it's sort of the side scheme with it can be a little bit of a problem as well. It can scale up quite a lot in multiplayer. Up next is Crime, and we're going to see a few side scheme modular sets start to creep in now. And the hardest part about Crime is that these side schemes have about 6 threat each or so on them. They ask for quite a bit of threat removal for solo, but the effects on them generally aren't too pressing. So Justice will absolutely breeze through Crime, whereas Aggression Protection does struggle a bit more in solo. In multiplayer, they don't scale up too much, so I don't think they, deserve to be put in a higher category for multiplayer, but just keep in mind that they do scale a little bit. State of Emergency, another side scheme, sort of modular. In solo play, I don't think it's too bad. There's only, about 3 threat on the side schemes. The effects on them are a bit annoying, but Citywide Crisis is basically going to miss almost every time if you can keep on top of things. If you can't, a little bit more dangerous, which is why it's in this category. In multiplayer, they scale like crazy, and Citywide Crisis becomes a kind of a crisis. Guerrilla Tactics is here as well. This has a couple of side schemes in, and they have kind of weird effects based on how many minions and sort of enemies are in play. So if there's a lot of enemies left in play, you have a problem, but for the most part, not too bad. On standard mode, a few of their effects aren't at full power. From every direction won't surge. It just adds a little bit of threat, so it's not a problem really. But if you do have a lot of minions out or something, it can just end the main scheme. So still a little bit dangerous, but yeah, on standard mode, this set isn't too bad. Don't put it in 4 Horsemen though, because the multi-villain scenarios is where this really scales up a lot. Something that stands out to me looking at the 5th level of difficulty here is that we're starting to get a lot more non-minion sort of modulars come back into the fold, and I really enjoy those. They're really quite interesting to use, even if most scenarios do want you to add in a few minions. These are pretty fun as a second modular to add, or a bonus one, or if you're playing just this, these side scheme ones are really good to add to give you more to do, or to take more advantage of one way or another in Skilled Investigator. Symbiotic Strength is a weird modular set because I think in multiplayer it's actually a lot easier to deal with. One of the most annoying cards from it, Webbed Up, stops you attacking and then stuns you. So if there's something you need to deal with, like a scary minion, it can stop you in your tracks. But in multiplayer, someone else can probably deal with it. No big deal. Or maybe this will hit the Justice player. Not really a big deal to not attack a couple of times. The scariest card is Swinging Assault, which can make the villain attack you while you're Alter Ego, or more specifically, flip you to hero form, then attack you. But in solo play, that can just catch you out if you've flipped Alter Ego with no allies or anyone to block, low hit points, thinking, oh, I'll be fine here. This card can ruin your day. In multiplayer, even if that kind of situation happens, someone else can probably defend for you, which takes away a lot of the teeth from this set, and the minions aren't too bad. The boost effect's a bit annoying, but, it's fine. Then we have Blue Moon, the setup card that comes with this that is always in play from turn 1, gives every minion guard, which is a nightmare for rush plays, but pretty fun for everyone else. The minions themselves have some kind of annoying when revealed effects, something like stun or confuse you, but overall, not too big of a deal. Stats aren't too bad. In multiplayer, the teamwork can be a pain, but not enough to push it into the next category, in my opinion. If you're not aware, they changed the teamwork rules when Age of Apocalypse arrived. So instead of all the minions with teamwork, activating, it's just a new one. So it's just kind of a version of Quick Strike. Genosha is another one from Age of Apocalypse with the setup kind of thing in play. This one gives the villain steady, which is quite a big deal for some characters. Jubilee and Hawkeye are going to hate this, but some characters don't even, notice that effect at all. Overall, the encounter cards are much easier, I would say, than the Blue Moon's encounter cards, but the setup card is scarier. Finishing off our trilogy of setup sort of modulars here is Clan Akaba. This one's really fun if you are a Justice player and you want more threat removed. This set adds a lot of threat, but it mostly adds it to the side scheme, so the main scheme is no more likely to, suddenly go over, which makes it quite solo friendly. I quite like the way they've done this. I quite like adding this to scenarios like Rhino, where the main scheme's already very dangerous and you don't want to add any more threat pressure there. So you can kind of add threat pressure on this side scheme that starts in play, the kind of ancient ritual, I think it's called. So I quite like this set. Some of the cards are a bit scarier. This one's probably a little bit more toward the upper end of this difficulty category, but still within it. Symbiotic strength is a bit of a favorite of mine. It's like you're giving the villain a symbiote suit, which is pretty fun. So I like that. You can kind of add that to anyone, and it's kind of an excuse for the spider, you know, the web warrior heroes to fight them, that kind of thing. Blue Moon, really good for mutants to fight, but also makes sense. You know, if anyone's in space, you can just throw that in there. They kind of fit. You know, it's blue area of the moon is what that's short for. So that concludes difficulty level 5, a good challenge. Some of my favorite sets are here. I really love anything with the setup keyword. I really like that we've got some side scheme ones here that kind of change things up, and a lot of minion sets, obviously. At difficulty level 6, the game starts to ask more from us, and Super Strength is a great example of that. It gives the villain steady, which one of the sets we looked at already does do that, but it also gives them +1 attack, so they're hitting you harder or taking away one of your methods to be able to deal with it. Now, if you just have a bunch of allies to block with, yeah, it's not going to be too bad, but if an extra attack gets through, if you don't have that, it's going to make your life a bit more difficult, so the extra encounter cards from this set aren't generally too bad. Coming up next, we've got Whispers of Paranoia, which will bring in your nemesis with extra hit points, which is kind of crazy. The boost effect is a little bit annoying. You've also got a side scheme, which brings in your nemesis side scheme, but both of them have a lot of threat on, and it can be quite annoying. Sauron is really interesting. This came with the Iceman hero pack, and the encounter card difficulty here is hard to talk about, because some of the encounter cards, the Eye of Sauron, there are 3 copies of it, really not that bad in most circumstances, really quite okay. But then Sauron and the side scheme that brings him in, it's really, really annoying. Guerrilla Tactics makes its return on expert mode. You're going to see more surge, more things happening with the, you know, training dummies, more, you know, one of the side schemes goes from having 2 boost icons to basically 4, which can be a little bit scary. So definitely gets harder as you go into expert mode, which is really fun. And I wish more modular sets did this. Galactic Artifacts is really, really fun. A really unique set, which is half attachments, actually. I should have put that on here, and half side schemes. And the attachments are kind of weird. Some of them can end up in minions, and you can just defeat the minion, and you basically get to bypass the, you know, encounter card that was the attachment. It doesn't add any extra health onto them, anything like that. So in multiplayer, when you're more likely to have a minion on the board when you reveal one of those attachments, that's good. But in multiplayer, all those side schemes scale up a lot more. So for me, this kind of balances out the solo to multiplayer side of it. The side schemes, when you defeat them, do give you a beneficial effect. Some of them are really, really good, which makes it easier, but it's still a lot of threat to deal with. Still kind of some interesting weird stuff here. So I think it deserves to be at difficulty level 6. I didn't know what to put for the theme for Super Strength, but really I think this fits anybody who is, you know, pretty strong, or anybody who could feasibly become super strong. Anyone who uses tech, even, you know, let's say Claw, I'm sure he could have tech to boost up his physical strength, and it will make a lot of sense there as well. So that fits a lot of characters. Next up, we have Band of Badoon. When people think of this set, I think they, you know, believe it's easy because Drang, who it's normally found in, is relatively easy. But the Band of Badoon set is actually kind of challenging, and I almost had it in the category above this, difficulty level 7, but it's not that difficult, but it is still difficult because of Badoon Grunt. There's a couple copies of this guy, and when he engages you, you basically get an extra encounter card for your trouble, but he can engage you from the boost effect, so you get attacked, take some extra damage from him hitting you, then you have an extra encounter card for some reason, and there's a lot going on with that. There's also boost effects which give the villain, you know, piercing and overkill, which is kind of a crazy combo, so don't sleep on Band of Badoon. This is harder than you expect when you take it to other scenarios. Then we have Kree Militants, which, like Band of Badoon, is actually a lot of encounter cards in there. Band of Badoon had 10, there are 9 here, and these guys are not going to jump out as boost effects, but they do have a lot more health, you know, per minion on average, and they do have really, really annoying boost effects, some of which do have, you know, piercing or overkill, which is pretty dangerous in that regard. But if your defense is solid, you know, these guys aren't too troublesome otherwise. So a little bit difficult though. I think they're interesting in that some people overestimate them because, like, oh, it's Ronan's modular set, it's going to be incredibly difficult, and other people are like, oh, it's just a few minions, not that big of a deal. I think they're kind of in the middle. Next up, we have Sci-Fi, which is kind of interesting that it suits the mutants because it's got like Magneto and everything, but they kind of look robotic. They've got the program trait, you know, it kind of works for anything sciencey, spacey, robotic, and they are really, really interesting. You know, some of them are a little bit hard to deal with, but not adding too much pressure. And then some of them are Magneto 2.6. He can attack you with Villainous, and he builds up counters, which means his subsequent attacks are going to make you discard more cards and things, which is pretty scary. The scariest card, though, is the side scheme, which is going to also draw you some kind of minion, probably from the Sci-Fi set. and that's a little bit annoying, a little bit difficult. As I sort of touched upon, these sets have quite a few cards in them, and the more cards in a modular set, the more likely you are to get it from the encounter deck. So if you're looking to change the difficulty up, make things a bit more difficult, these are good sets to do it because you're likely to find them. Also, if you want to, have a different experience, these are going to make an impact, especially Band of Badoon. You will notice them almost always. Savage Land is fun. It's another setup one, so this will change the game from the beginning. And the setup card gives the villain Retaliate, which is quite annoying, and most of the reason it's here, because the encounter cards don't really belong in difficulty level 6, they're more like difficulty level 4 or 5, but Retaliate is very annoying. And its special effect that some of the cards will trigger make you discard cards, which means you can kind of end up missing things your deck is built around. It can just be quite disruptive and annoying, and sometimes that can make more of a difference than actual, tangible things like extra threat or taking extra damage, because, now your deck, your plan isn't going to work. So kind of interesting how that is. But the dinosaurs, very fun to fight, so are the apes, but not really a problem. Infinites is up next, and this is a weird one, because if you really rely on allies to block with, this can make things quite difficult. You can just block with allies still and just let the infinite soldiers go crazy, because every time you block with an ally, the gene pool gets more threat, which makes the infinite soldiers get a little crazier. Getting Surge on them is pretty bad. Getting +3 hit points with the guard trait, keyword on them, kind of dangerous. So depending on how you go, it can either snowball and you have a big problem with infinite soldiers, or you just completely keep on top of it and everything is fine here. So yeah, a bit of a strange one, but overall I think the way it deters you from blocking with allies, which is a primary strategy for a lot of decks in Marvel Champions, does make it quite dangerous. Next up are the Hounds, which I think might surprise people to see it here, because the Hounds themselves, they're just like 2 hit point, little minions, not a problem, but they can be quite disruptive how they change you back from alter ego, but also Ahab, who is kind of the mini boss in the set, his spear, and the side scheme all are kind of scary cards, which definitely raise this one up. Ahab's energy spear can give the villain overkill and piercing, which is just pretty dangerous. Frost Giants are next, a classic from Mad Titan's Shadow that I really enjoy using, and they are not terrible themselves. They will have toughness, but they can cause you to be stunned from boost effects, things like that. Lorthy has tons and tons of boost icons, so you have to watch out for them. Horror is up next. Part of me wanted to put this a little bit higher. If the setting environment, which gives everything quick strike, is in play, suddenly things are a lot more dangerous here, particularly the Cultist, which brings in the Kraken, which, as you can see, is the health scales per person, so in multiplayer that can be a lot, but generally you can deal with these things, especially because one of the encounter cards, when it comes up, the Band of Stakes, I think it's called, is actually quite beneficial to take. It's pretty good for a lot of heroes, but a little bit scary. You have to respect it. Something I want to note here is that for theme, I put magic for horror. Anyone who uses magic, they can have vampires and things. It kind of fits anyone with spells, but also it kind of fits the horror theme. We looked at Personal Nightmare and mod sets like that. It can be fun to pair those together. Iron Spider Sinister 6 is probably one of my favorite mod sets in the game. Each of the minions is, they have really thematic abilities. The Sandman, for example, makes you discard cards a bit like he does in his scenario and things like that. Really quite fun. Some of them are quite challenging, but at the same time, they don't hit you out of nowhere. There's no, sudden loss condition in there. So kind of high on the attrition, but kind of low on kind of the burst effect. I really like them. They're fun. Use them if you haven't. I think they come with SPDR. Next up is Sinister Assault, and I really like this set. I almost had it in a higher difficulty category. I almost had it in a lower difficulty category. They basically just have a bunch of health and you can take them out. But some of them have quick strike, some of them have things like insight. They all have very respectable stats, when they attack you, because they have villainous as well as, like 2 attack or, 2 scheme, things like that, and some kind of ability. But what's kind of scariest is that they all have 3 boost icons, which means the villain will hit hard and scheme hard all the time when you include these. So the overall thing just makes them into this category for me. Wrecking Crew, kind of similar to Sinister Assault. These are pretty big minions, actually a little bit bigger. They will have villainous, they are going to hit you really hard. But other than that, they're pretty straightforward. Quite a lot of boost icons on those as well, so watch out for them. They almost made it into a high category as well, so it would kind of depend how easily you can deal with big minions on demand. Western was a weird one to include here. I know I wasn't sure where to put it. I guess this category was quite difficult to rank based on these past few, but basically, the encounter cards in here aren't too bad, although one of them can suddenly make you discard a bunch of your stuff from the board. But what's really difficult can be the show setting environment that comes into play. Everything takes 1 extra damage. It means all your allies are taking extra consequential damage. Every time the villain attacks you, you're taking extra damage from that, potentially, which is quite scary. But also, your attacks are doing more. If that comes up, suddenly you can kind of burst down the villain in some circumstances. It's really weird. Sometimes it's awful and ruins your whole game plan. Other times, it just kind of invites you to just obliterate the villain. But because it introduces those extra difficulties, I think if you're going to win, quite often you would have won anyway. it kind of introduces a key set you will lose a lot more than many encounter sets, and that is why it makes this difficulty level. A lot of crime-themed ones here, although different kind of crime. Western is very different to Iron Spider's Sinister Six, although it is fun to combine the Sinister Six and the Sinister Six. Iron Spiders and the regular Sinister Assault set. Really fun if you want lots of scary minions, lots of spider-themed minions. I really enjoy that. And although you technically can't have both Electros in play, the Iron Spider's Electro is technically different. It's a female version, kind of different, so you can totally use those Don't Tell Fantasy Flight games that you had them on the board together, no problem. As you can see, this is a huge list of modulars. Hopefully mobile viewers can see this okay, because there's a lot going on here with a lot of different card counts. We've got as low as 4 from Super Strength, there's 5, but the 5th one is, permanent, already in play, up to 10 with Band of Badoon. So you can kind of do what you want with these. Loads of minions, loads of different things going on here. Really fun. I really like all these sets. This is kind of a sweet spot for the kind of modular set I like to add into a lot of scenarios. Into the juicy stuff, into very difficult, and we're starting with the Acolytes. These guys are annoying. Because they have the teamwork keyword, you want to take them out, or subsequent encounter cards are going to be more punishing, but when you take them out, something bad happens to you. The worst of these is Fabian Cortez, as you can see on the screen here. When you defeat him, you get another Acolyte. When you defeat them, then you get their bad effect as well. Pretty annoying, and yeah, in multiplayer, that teamwork is going to go off a lot more. It's not as bad as it used to be, so I think even in multiplayer, I don't need to put them in, difficulty level 8, for example, but you do have to respect them at that a little bit more, so be careful. If you struggle with Magneto, change these guys out for, I don't know, a difficulty level 3, easy modular set, and, it's completely fine to do that. I actually recommend it if you don't typically enjoy that encounter. Next up is Black Tom Cassidy from the Juggernaut scenario normally. I love this. This is one of my favorite mod sets as well. I just really like this. So Black Tom Cassidy here is kind of an interesting sort of mini boss within this, but there are a lot of, I think they're called creeping vines, and they have guard, they have quick strike, they can stun you. They're kind of weird to work around, really fun. And, it makes sense. They stun you. It's kind of like the vines are grabbing you. So that's really cool. Kind of awesome. I wish we had more kind of like naturey, wild kind of like encounter sets. Next up, we have the Inheritors. And I'm ranking these guys as if there was a Web Warrior character in play 9 times out of 10, because if you're not playing a Web Warrior hero, there is no point playing, this mod set in your encounter. It's just no point to it, because then they become very blank and you might as well use something different. But if you include them, if you include the Web Warrior, these are really fun. They do something when revealed, so they always make an impact, and each inheritor gives a bonus to all other inheritors. So depending on which ones come out, particularly in multiplayer where you're likely to see multiple in one encounter phase, really fun how that kind of makes you use them differently, sort of play around them differently. The theme here is kind of interesting for the Inheritors. I really think whoever you're playing the Web Warriors or, it's Peter Parker, Spider-Woman up against, you're just going about your business. You could just drop the Inheritors into that scenario, and that's kind of fun because it can really increase the difficulty, especially because there's 9 of them. You're going to see these guys come up and they're going to make a difference. Next up is Children of Thanos, and this might surprise people. I put Black Order a lot lower, but these boost effects are incredibly annoying, as well as the minions on average being a bit more annoying. Not a huge encounter set, but I quite like this one. Don't underestimate it, I think. I think this can make quite a difference. Next up is Menagerie Medley. 9 cards in this modular set. It's going to make an impact, especially because the boost effect is so annoying. You're going to see these silent ghosts, these Star Shucks are going to do indirect damage to you, or they're going to, hit your board. It's a little bit crazy, so you have to watch out for these guys. The confuse that these guys might put onto you can make the, schemes a little bit difficult in solo to keep under control. But there's a little bit of relief in that the robots, the kind of other minion in this set, is actually pretty chill. Space Pirates are up next. I know people hate this set. They absolutely hate this set. I don't mind it as much as most people, but removing cards from your hand, from your deck, it can, lead to problems. Your deck might just not function anymore, as well as just lots of quick strike being quite annoying, as well as extra boost cards making the minions, the villain, hit harder. So a little bit scary. You have to give it quite a lot of respect. And with 8 cards in the encounter deck, quite a lot of sets have that, but they are going to come up. Enchantress is up next, another set people famously hate. Quite a lot of people don't like this set because it takes away your allies, but then it stops you from attacking. You have to go alter ego, and Enchantress is then going to scheme for 2 if, when she comes in and puts that seduce onto you in the first place, which can be quite scary, quite annoying. That can end games in solo play. Multiplayer, just kind of annoying. Galaxy's Most Wanted, maybe, living up to its fearsome reputation with a couple of, in my opinion, very difficult modular sets, but I don't mind Space Pirates or Enchantress that much. Most people do. I think I'm weird. Let me know in the comments if you also don't mind those sets. Lady Deathstrike is up next. This one's kind of annoying. It's quick strike. It comes in, the side scheme brings her around. It's kind of annoying, quite a lot to deal with, quite disruptive. Symbiotic Strength makes its return, but for solo play. This is quite a big jump for it up to here to, difficulty level 7. But Webbed Up stopping 2 attacks can really shut you down when you really need to find damage in solo play. That's a huge block for damage. But what makes it worse is that Swinging Assault, which can just wipe you out if you thought you were safe in Alter Ego. And yeah, just a little bit of pace on this one is kind of difficult, although the average boost icons are pretty low. State of Emergency makes its return, this time for multiplayer, harder in multiplayer, kind of the opposite of Symbiotic Strength in my opinion. This can be pretty scary. Because you get so many more side schemes in multiplayer, more people revealing more side schemes, Citywide Crisis is a lot more likely to hit. And that's going to be kind of a problem. It's going to do quite a lot, particularly if it happens from its boost effect. And the side schemes scale up 3 per person. So in solo play, I just have to remove 3 threat. In 4-player, you have to remove 12. That's a huge increase that really earns its place in this category. Kind of another mix here. We've talked about a couple of these before, so I won't dwell on that. But something I want to point out for Lady Deathstrike is she has the Reaver trait, which means she kind of synergizes with the Reaver modular set that is coming up shortly. Don't you worry, guys. And they have teamwork, so that makes that happen. And yeah, that's kind of fun. Overall, these are some of the difficult sets here. They're not just going to, I got one of their encounter cards, I've lost a game now. But they can hurt you more than average by quite a bit. They're kind of challenging, and you kind of have to work around them. Time for the punishing difficulty level. Here are the Reavers. Now that teamwork has been nerfed a bit, it's less devastating, but it's still quite annoying because a lot of them have tough, or a lot of them say you cannot attack them until they've attacked, and that means you basically have to take free damage from them, which is what happens. Donald Pierce will trigger teamwork even in solo play because he makes you find a Reaver from the discard pile, and if it's one of those ones which gets the attachment which says, you cannot attack them until they have attacked, the timing works out that teamwork triggers, they attack you. Then the one revealed happens, they get the attachment, means they have to attack before you can, deal with them. So basically you're taking 6 damage from some of them. That's kind of annoying. That's kind of crazy. And quite a respectable amount of boost icons on these as well. Going to make the villainous on Donald hit harder and the actual villain themselves, attack and scheme harder. Now we have the infamous Anachronauts. When revealed, they do something annoying, but their boost effects are scary as well. They give extra boost cards, so you can add up, a few of them, get some really big attacks going from the villain. Very scary. And the minions themselves, they have some decent stats on, higher attack or things like that. So if you want to challenge yourself with a good set of minions, Anachronauts, I highly recommend. Just be prepared for the difficulty because they are in the punishing category, like the Reavers, for a reason. Next up is Master of Time, which I think some people think is a lot easier than Anachronauts, but I played this several times, kind of almost side by side with Anachronauts, and for my money, this is almost as difficult. Slightly easier, but still definitely in the punishing category. There is a lot of Surge. Kang has toughness, and villainous, so you have to get through and defeat him, but that can kind of be a problem, and he'll come back into play from the other encounter cards. The obligation that stops you attacking him isn't a problem if he's not in play, but if he is in play and you haven't got rid of it, you have to go Alter Ego while he's engaged with you. He's going to scheme villainous. It's kind of a problem because, yeah, it's just a little bit nasty. The worst thing, however, is the time displaced soldiers, I think it's called. They have Surge on them, and the boost effect gives you an extra encounter card as well. So it's just kind of really, really bad. Worth noting for the Reavers that the teamwork still does make them more difficult in multiplayer. Not quite enough to get into the upper difficulty, nightmare difficulty, just because of the way that the Age of Apocalypse changed the rules for teamwork. But nonetheless, it's still pretty respectable threat that you have to deal with. And yeah, these sets mean business. Now, Goblin Gear is here, and some people think, it's just a glider, which is bad. The other attachments aren't too bad at all, but actually, I think they're pretty respectable. Maybe they wouldn't get this encounter set, modular set, into this difficulty tier on their own, but with the glider, they still fit here as a respectable threat. But the glider that just makes the villain attack again, or, scheme again, what a horrible pain. If you get this in solo play, and you don't have the right cards in hand, your upcoming encounter phase could be an absolute game-ending nightmare. But if you do have the cards in hand, you just get rid of it super easy. So it's a super high variance, but the bad side of that variance is so severe that it really, really earns its place here. Take this to multiplayer, almost always somebody will be able to get rid of the advanced glider immediately in the subsequent player phase. But in multiplayer, this could be the first player's encounter card, and then you've got, player 2, 3, 4. They could get extra attacks, which is going to make the villain, double attack or double scheme, and that goes crazy. And, there is a treachery that also brings a glider in, so you are very likely to see it. And when it comes in, it's kind of that moment that makes the whole table hold their breath. Everyone's telling you of that encounter card, hoping they don't get double attacked or double schemed against. Telepathy is up next. One of the other setup, permanent sets. And This one, because it adds Retaliate and adds plus Scheme, I think it's harder than average. But what the sneaky thing that really elevates this over some of the other ones we've looked at, like Super Strength and the Age of Apocalypse setup environment ones, like Blue Moon and things, is that a couple of the boost cards in this just have Overkill written on them. So there are some dangerous attacks that can get through to you. And yeah, the Retaliate is going to make you take damage. It's going to make you go Alter Ego. He's going to scheme for more dangerous in solo. But in multiplayer, the villain's health scales up so much. Everyone's going to take so much damage from this Retaliate, especially if you want to attack with allies. So kind of dangerous, a little bit difficult. Mystique is up next, and I know people hate this set as well. Why did they put this set in Sabretooth? It's the first one in the box. I don't know, but Mystique is pretty brutal to deal with. The cards which, get shuffled into your deck, they surge, so you still have to deal with something immediately, and then they emerge, something bad happens, and you have one less card in hand, which is really annoying because now you have more problems to deal with and less resources to do so. So, yeah, earns its place here on punishing difficulty. Didn't quite make Nightmare for me. She's annoying that you can't attack the villain, really bad for rush decks, but otherwise, typically I find this one is mostly okay to be handled, although, again, still anything in the punishing difficulty is very difficult, don't get me wrong. Brothers Grimm is up next. I think people underestimate these a bit, but look at the boost effect on Brothers Grimm. After the villain finishes attacking or scheming, you put them into play, which means you just randomly get an 8 health minion against you, but then the Force Interrupt will trigger because they'll be ready to activate against you in most circumstances. That'll be the part of the villain phase. After the villain attacks, the minions attack you, and then you get an encounter card. And the encounter cards from these guys, which are attachments, basically they're like double encounter cards. They get attached to the villain, something bad will happen when the villain attacks, and then you get another encounter card for your troubles. So these guys are pretty scary and can add a lot of tempo and things to the game that you have to deal with. Very much a war of attrition rather than anything kind of, hitting you out of nowhere, but at the same time, it's a very high pace that they ask from you. The Doomsday Chair is up next from the core set, and this one is so scary that kind of the best way to deal with MODOK from this set is kind of to ignore him. Two of the side schemes will try and bring him into play. Some of the attachments will try and keep him in play. You can just leave him there, and as a table, you just have to mitigate basically 2 attack or 2 scheme every turn, which for 4 people is absolutely fine. In solo play, it's very hard to deal with. The side schemes also don't scale up, which is slightly nice for multiplayer as well. But yeah, this set is pretty scary. Honestly, I can't get over that Doomsday Chair game in the core set. They really aimed really high with that one. It's very scary. So a lot of dangerous stuff here you have to be wary of. For telepathy, and also the other upcoming permanent setup kind of modular that came with Next Evolution, I really like these as kind of expert plus mode. If you play on expert, throw in one of these, and it's kind of a extra difficulty level without going all the way to heroic or anything as drastic as standard to expert 2. So yeah, highly recommend that if you like that kind of thing, if you want to up the difficulty. This is our complete list of punishing difficulty modular sets, and yeah, these are kind of, I wouldn't recommend you add them in most circumstances unless you really, really want a challenge, in which case these are perfect because these will start to test stronger characters and stronger decks in a meaningful way. Nightmare is where things get really difficult and you have to have nerves of steel to deal with them. Not the protection upgrade, just you have to be ready for some tough stuff here. And we have another core set modular, Legions of Hydra. And this one is probably the easiest maybe of these, but at the same time, the side scheme is basically Shadow of the Past because, it's a scary side scheme with the hazard icon, and you get a minion in play that is pretty scary, and you can't deal with it until the side scheme, so it's messing up your sequencing sometimes for certain aspects and cards and decks. And the other cards, apart from Madam Hydra and those side schemes, which are, bring out Madam Hydra, are these Hydra guards we saw before in Hydra Patrol, where, 4 health, guard, defeat them, another encounter card. Getting those extra encounter cards makes Madam Hydra and her stupid side schemes more likely to come out. And, it's just kind of dangerous, especially on scenarios which already have a lot of pressure on you because it really ups the tempo. Don't put this, or actually the Anachronaut ones that we talked about earlier, that kind of thing, into Red Skull unless you really want a hard challenge, because you're going to get these, hazard icons, and then Madam Hydra is going to get brought into play, and it's going to be pain. Exodus is up next. This guy just sticks around forever. He kind of feels like MODOK, He's got Retaliate as well, 6 health, but when revealed, he gets attachment, which means you basically have to defeat him twice, and he has bigger stats while it's on him. God, sometimes I feel like the best strategy for him as well is just leave him there, because it's terrible to get rid of him. Then the side team comes in, that's going to bring him back in as well, and he's very, very annoying. And he's got the Acolyte trait, which means he synergizes with the Acolyte Modular. So you can throw this guy into Magneto if Magneto wasn't tough enough for you, and then the teamwork's going to happen more reliably as well, especially because this guy can stick around for a few turns sometimes, because he's just so annoying to deal with sometimes. Up next is the infamous Mr. Hyde. 10 health, free attack. When revealed, bad things happen. He's got a card that makes him attack with overkill, multiple cards that kind of try and bring Mr. Hyde in. He's going to enter play somehow. You just know he is. And it's going to be a massive nuisance. And even Calvin Zabo, you know, he's a minion that you don't want to defeat with free schemes, so Alter Ego starts to become a bit scarier. And this set means business. The saving grace is that there are only 4 encounter cards, so there is a chance you don't see anything from it, but like I say, you just need to see one card from it, and things will start to go wrong for you. The Doomsday Chair makes its return in solo mode. Here, it's very difficult to deal with. If you are just one person, the side teams come in with 8 threat. It's going to be a pain. The MODOK himself, you've got to deal 8 damage, but he's got Retaliate, but he could have the attachment, which means he, basically doesn't go away. It's just a massive pain, and then you finally get rid of him, and he comes back maybe from the side scheme, and it's like, why did I bother? This is really, really difficult. I almost put it one category up. I think it's very, very annoying. As you can see, Nightmare mode has a lot of mini bosses, which are really kind of, full of bosses. In a lot of circumstances, they can feel almost as scary as the villain. Osborn Tech is up next. I almost put this in a category up as well. It's kind of different, Some of these attachments which come into play aren't as bad as other ones, which are devastating, like tracking display, which means characters cannot defend, so you just have to take whatever attack comes your way, and that's horrible. They will have Surge as well, so it's going to come into play. It's something else bad is going to happen, possibly, getting instantly attacked afterwards, which can end games. It's very difficult. Like, oh, I'm not allowed to defend this. I guess I'm going to take this full attack from the villain. But like I say, some of the other attachments really aren't that bad, but they do still all have Surge, and they do all have free boost icons, which means the villain is going to hit hard and scheme hard. So Flight is the last of the next evolution permanent setup, sort of Mr. Sinister attachment modulars, and it's the scariest in my opinion because the villain permanently has overkill. Now suddenly blocking with allies, basically the most reliable way to block damage, doesn't really work, and you're getting hit even harder with that +1 attack, and that is scary. If you build for it, you can absolutely devastate this. If you just go full stun lock in solo play, it's not a problem, but other than doing that, this really does end games, sometimes quite by surprise. If your encounter card gets you teched an extra time and you weren't ready for it, it's going to hurt like heck, so be wary of this. And in a similar vein, we have the Infinity Gauntlet, infamously strong, +1 scheme, +1 attack, and after every other attack, or activation I should say, you get one of the Infinity Stones, which are kind of a pain. The Time Stone can end solo games in a hurry, adding threat to the main scheme. You've got stuns, confuse, things like that are quite annoying. If you've got Night Nurse on the table, okay, maybe the stones on average aren't quite so bad, but still, this adds quite a lot of tempo to a scenario. It's quite an obstacle. If you can win fast or stun lock or things like that, not too much of a problem, but if the Infinity Gauntlet gets to do what the Infinity Gauntlet does, you have to respect it, you have to deal with what it does, and it is generally just pretty difficult. This is one of my favorites to add to easier scenarios because, the extra Infinity Gem every other activation, it's fairly steady at least, even though it's quite high in terms of attrition, and that's kind of what they need to bring them up to a respectable level. Having to deal with the Infinity Gauntlets, rubbish is what makes the, weaker villain stuff actually something you have to respect more because you have less resources to dedicate to dealing with it. So that concludes the Nightmare category. For Flight, it was really weird, flying characters, you can add this to someone like Green Goblin who has Glider and it makes sense, or someone flying with wings. But you can just add this to anyone, and it's kind of funny. A flying rhino is a really funny kind of concept. For the theme of Infinity Gauntlets, I didn't quite know what to call it, so I went with Finale. But really, any villain that is strong enough to possibly gather and wrestle the stones of other people and find them is going to be the kind of villain that this makes most sense for. But again, really good for just weaker villains where it doesn't really make sense. Bring them up to the level that's good for stronger heroes and decks to fight. I really enjoy that. Overall, the Nightmare difficulty mod sets are sets I would only recommend you include if you're really, really finding things too easy, if you really want to challenge because they really up things. The exception maybe is Flight, if you're building around it, if you're countering it. But the other ones, fairly hard to counter overall, I would say. You kind of just have to deal with them, and that is scary in itself. Omega level threat detected. Future Past is scary. So this is intended for the Mutant Genesis campaign. You take 1 or 2 of the cards and throw them into the encounter deck, each scenario. If you add the whole thing in, the whole set in, things are just really, really kind of treacherous. Bastion can come in as a boost effect that is scary. Nimrod will stick around for several turns that is scary. And it will even bring in a super version of your Nemesis that is scary. Put some respect on Future Past because it is out to hurt you, and Future Past is out to make sure you don't have a future left. It's going to end your game if you're not careful. In a similar kind of vein, we have Kree Fanatic, not to be confused with Kree Militants. Kree Fanatic is a Ronin. Ronin scales 9 health per person, and unlike the Dragon, as we looked at way earlier in this video, there's no kind of shortcuts to defeating him, and he might just come back. You know, the boost effect puts him into play, which is insane. This set is only available from print and play for good reason. It is really very devastating. Some of the encounter cards make you discard, and any cards also from this set are cards which will now affect you, which can miss sometimes a little bit, but when it hits, it can hit you incredibly hard. Lastly, we have Badoon Headhunter. Card for card, they're maybe not as bad as the other sets we've looked at, but everything in Badoon Headhunter tends to have Surge on it, because again, it's kind of like Future Past. You only meant to have 1 or 2 cards from it in each campaign scenario for Galaxy's Most Wanted this time. Very difficult, very annoying. You can combo this with Band of Badoon if you want, but just watch out for that difficulty. This is devastating. That's our difficulty level 10 Omega level threats. The hardest mod sets in the game, in my opinion, are right here. Now, things like Infinity Gauntlet that hit you every turn almost are like a little bit more consistent, but these hit so hard that you might regret it. It's going to be painful. Now, here's the thing. Here's a little secret here. You can put these in encounter deck and only see 1 or 2 of them in a whole game, especially if you go fast. So you can absolutely win games against these. Putting these hard mod sets in doesn't mean a scenario is unable to be defeated. It just means you need to get lucky or hit hard or have a really strong hero in deck. So on the one hand, this completes our look at all the modular sets in the game. We've looked at 97 so far, but I promised you guys 99. So I've got a couple of surprises in store for you guys. So there are a couple of sets from upcoming hero packs that we've seen a little bit previewed, but not really seen the full thing. So I'm quickly just going to speculate. Crazy Gang is kind of Queen of Hearts and things. They tend to kind of be the enemies of Excalibur, which is basically half British heroes and half X-Men. I guess they didn't think the British heroes would sell well enough on their own. And they tend to, you know, fight those from what I can see. Then we've got the Hellfire, which is pretty famous in the X-Men lore. And for my money, I think Crazy Gang is going to be at level 5, a good challenge. Whereas Hellfire, I think it'll be pretty difficult. Difficulty level 8. Punishing. I think you're going to need to respect those. They do some crazy things, you know, they take a lot to deal with, or they hit you on multiple fronts, have different conditions. So that's pretty fun, and that's where I think they'll end up. So if you're watching from the future, hopefully this is correct. I'll probably put it somewhere in the comments or description if I change my mind, but pretty confident this is roughly where they're going to be. This has been a really long video, guys, so thank you for sticking with me. I've put so many hours into probably editing it at this point, but you know, making it, all the preparation. It's been a lot, so if you've enjoyed it, please consider like, commenting, subscribing, anything that makes YouTube happy. Consider joining the channel if you have spare income and you want to support this, because I really try to go for quality over quantity. It takes a lot of time to put this stuff out. And the last thing I'll say is, if you enjoy talking about Marvel Champions, hop in the Discord, links all down in the description below. And what we're looking at here is a list of everything we talked about on the video. This is the conclusion, and you can see we started with help to players, bonus sets, before we really got into things with the ultra easy sets. You know, having looked at everything from Reavers to MODOK, you know, the Doomsday Chair, suddenly looking back at goblin gimmicks and experimental weapons feels like a lifetime ago, feels very, very different. And I know what you're thinking. Villain Fury, why are you looking at this on a browser? Why are you scrolling around like this? Well, I made everything in this video into a PDF that I'm sharing with you guys. So if you're sitting down to play Marvel Champions and you're not sure what modular set you want, you can just open this up on your phone or whatever, and you can scroll through it and look just as easily as I am now. It will have everything categorized under its difficulty level and then sort of ordered by the category next. And you can kind of pick and see what you want in terms of whether you want to add more minions to the scenario or what kind of theme you're looking for. And it should make picking modulars really, really easy, I hope. Again, primarily by difficulty level, but the category, the theme is also there at a glance, should be really, really easy. And there's so many mod sets in this game, guys. Hopefully you enjoyed this. You know, there's too many to really talk about individually at this point anymore. But I've really enjoyed this, even though it was quite, difficult. And yeah, this is it. This is what you can find. Links to this in the description. Please enjoy it. But yeah, that's basically it. Thank you so much for watching. Hopefully this helps you with your modular sets in the gameplay. Let me know if this has encouraged you to try different modular sets. Let me know if it helps. Thanks again, and most importantly, stay villainous. See you next time.